Hello, loves. We are talking about Pam's story. Let's get into it. The father of my son was my first love. I met him in junior high, and I figured out I was pregnant early on in the 9th grade. Carnation instant breakfast was popular back then. That's what I used to have every morning before I would go off to school. Well, this particular morning, I had vanilla. My mom and dad had just gotten a brand new carpeting, and all of a sudden, I got sick all over my mother's new carpet. I didn't feel like I had the flu. I just erupted. My mother asked, "Do you feel sick?" No. The next morning, like clockwork, it happens again. So my mother's kind of looking at me sideways. From then on, I would take the Carnation instant breakfast and I would dump it in the toilet. My mom got a little wise to me. She'd say, "Do you have something you want to tell me?" I would play innocent. And say, "I don't know what you're talking about." She asked, "Are you pregnant?" In all honesty, my mom was a very sweet person. She really wanted to know, not because she wanted to clobber me, but because she wanted to help me. But I thought, no, if I tell her, I won't get to see him anymore, and my life will be destroyed. Of course, that's what teenagers think, right? Hold on. Come on, Smokes. Sorry, guys. My cats are being wildly crazy. Especially that pain in the butt today. Alright. As teenagers, you tend to hide things from your parents. Even if it's innocent, even if it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying this was a bad thing, but, you don't want your parents to be ashamed of you. And especially with the social stigma of the time, there's a whole lot to it, right? Anyway, continuing on. I'm not exactly how I thought I was going to pull all this off, but I intended to. My boyfriend had given me this big brown faux fur coat for Christmas. This kind of big, bulky thing. They were very popular then. The one he gave me was too big, but he gave it to me. As it turns out, this coat would become extremely important for several reasons. It was the coat we cuddled in, and it became a uniform once I realized I was pregnant. Being 14, we decided that we were going to get married. We got jobs to start saving our money. He worked 2 paper routes, and I had a Stingray bicycle that he would ride me on the back of, and we would throw newspapers and make collections. I took up jobs doing all kinds of little things. We thought we were set. We bought a little tiny color TV. We bought booties. We bought outfits. We were looking into health insurance. We were just going to show everybody how grown up we were because we intended to raise our child. Okay, pausing there. She said she was 14. Now, yes, I know 14 is quite young to have a child. Sex education is important. But that being said, they're doing everything responsibly to raise a child, right? They're 14. Yes, it's going to change their world. Absolutely. Raising a kid, even in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s and so on, is not easy at all by any means, but they are being responsible. So the fact that we think as a society that young kids can't do what's right and make decisions for themselves when it comes to their own body, and if they're pregnant, whether it's an abortion or continuing the pregnancy and raising the child, which is what is best, if they, if a woman chooses to continue her pregnancy, that is. It's ridiculous to me that they're going to force adoptions, even in today's world, right? Because a lot of grown folks seem to think that, well, I don't want to raise that baby. It's not my own. I'm talking the parents, the grandparents, I should say. And then they force the child up for adoption, and there's this whole big thing. I'm not saying all grandparents are like this, but many, many are. And then they later regret it, right? The pregnant woman the pregnant person, the birth father, the birth mother, the birth parents, right, will regret it because they wanted a chance to raise their baby. And so it's not only going to cause problems with their own families, it's going to cause problems for the adoptee, the baby, right? And it's just this vicious cycle. Anyway, sorry, ranting here. We thought we were pulling it off, and nobody knew. PE class was becoming problematic, though, because you dressed and showered with everybody. I got a pretty good at lollygagging so I could get dressed without people really noticing, but eventually rumors started going around the school. It's getting warmer, and I'm still wearing this brown coat, and my clothes are getting a little tight. So one day I'm getting dressed, and the gym teacher came up. There was a nickname for her, but I won't say what it was. Anyway, she confronted me. Hey, you pregnant? There were a couple of other girls in the locker room, so I didn't turn around. I thought if I responded to it, it's like I'm admitting guilt. So I pretend I didn't know who she was talking to, even though I was the only one in the aisle. So she reaches out, grabs my shoulder, spins me around, and says, I'm talking to you. I said, I don't know what you were talking about. Don't put your hands on me. Don't put your hands on other people, period. Not cool. Anyway, she didn't like that comment, so she pushed me, and I lunged forward and pushed her back and said, don't you touch me. She came up swinging. What the frick is wrong with this teacher? Sorry, teachers know better. Like, yikes. Granted, I know this was like in the 50s, 60s, but geez Louise. She couldn't get me down. I was this quiet little blonde-haired, blue-eyed simpleton who never opened her mouth, and all of a sudden, she's got a problem because I was fighting for my life. So another 2 weeks go by, and I start to develop a little itchy rash, and I'm really worried. The German measles were going around, and I thought, oh my God, I've got German measles. So I go to the counselor and asked if she has a minute. I said I have a friend who thinks she's pregnant and could have been exposed to German measles. How far along does that person? Maybe I got a few more sentences on, but not many more. She said, we are going to the nurse's office. I'm thinking, you idiot, why did you say anything? But I was really frightened for the baby. She tells the doctor that she thinks I'm pregnant, and I laugh and I say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what's the matter with her. He opens my coat, and with every muscle in my body, I'm trying to pull that baby in. Then he put his hand against my stomach, and my son decided to do a jig. Babies. Come on, babies. You gotta get with the program. My son was the same way, though. He would jig when you're not supposed to jig and be quiet when you want them to jig. Sorry. Anyway, the doctor got an almost gray, serious look on his face and said, you're pregnant and quite a ways long. I was still saying, no, I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't done anything. This has got to be an immaculate conception. God, I can't see it. I can see it like a videotape in my head. They're looking at me saying, listen, we know you're pregnant. You've been exposed to the German measles. You have to tell your parents. We will give you this weekend. Either you tell them before you return to school on Monday, or we will tell them. I don't think I've ever felt more trapped, more frightened in my life ever. I've got to go home and deal with my parents. My father was in the Air Force, and he was also an educator. I had a lot of respect for my father, but I was afraid of him. I think more than anything else, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. That right there, I think, is huge. I don't think anyone truly wants to disappoint their parents, whether you're an adoptee or not. And then with the adoption on top of that, sorry, my interjection, you not only don't want to disappoint your adoptive parents, you have an extra set of parents, right, your bio parents. Well, technically, they're your natural parents, and then you have your extra set, which is the adoptive parents. But anyway, you guys get the point. And so you don't want to upset them either. You don't want to disappoint them. And so you're like fighting for your life to be an individual while being pulled in many directions, and it's hard. This could also be seen for divorces and step-parents and all that stuff. It's not easy. Anyway, my dad worked late hours, and was going for his doctorate at UCLA. So my mom and my sister and I would have dinner a lot That evening, my mother was sitting on the couch watching the news, and my sister and I were doing the dishes. I said to my sister, I have a problem. I think I'm pregnant. My sister got a huge smile on her face, turned on her heels, walked out the kitchen, barely got through the door, and hollers at Mom, Pam's pregnant. And I heard my mother start to sob. Yeah, where's the sister love? Anyway, see, when I was pregnant, okay, granted, my brother is 15 years older. When I was pregnant, what my brother did was, hey, I'm going to take you in for a week. I'm going to help you. We're going to figure this out. We knew at this point I was going to raise my son. I'm going to figure this out because his wife, my sister-in-law, love her, runs a daycare, and you're going to practice with babies. Not that I didn't have practice at all or already, but, it gave me a little bit more of a chance to be more hands-on 24/7. So I got that week to practice. On top of it, he gave me tons and tons of clothing. Now, I understand that, obviously she's younger and they don't have that, but, instead of tattling, comfort your sister. Hey, I'll help you talk to Mom together. Or, something like that. Like, what the heck? Sorry, guys. I'm a mess today, and, my rants, I feel like ranting. Anyway, I stood in that kitchen looking at the back door and trying to decide whether I was going to run. Then my mother said, Pam, come here. I went in, and she had that look that I never wanted to see. She was devastated, absolutely devastated. She said, is this true? I said, yes. And she started to cry. She said, I asked you, why didn't you tell me? And I couldn't answer the question. My mom was just destroyed. I destroyed my mother. Okay, so in this moment, I feel like it wasn't so much the pregnancy part that was destroying her mom, but it was the lying, the hiding of the pregnancy itself, which could be a problem. And I get it from a young mom standpoint that and like I said, I'm not as young as Pam is in this situation. I was 20 when I was pregnant, 21 when I gave birth. When you're going to be a single parent, not that she planned on being a single parent, but I was about to be a single parent, and you already feel this kind of shame, and you don't want to disappoint your mom, so you kind of hide it. And it's that kind of part where you feel like, as a parent, you want your child to trust you enough to come to you if you have an issue, or, if my son, okay, this is way out of line. God forbid this ever were to happen, or when it happens, he's only 10, so we're not thinking that far. But if I had a child who got pregnant or their partner got pregnant, I want them to come tell me, hey, Mom, we have a pregnancy. Okay, let's talk through it. Here are your options. I'm here to support you. Here are the statistics. Here are your resources. I'm always there for you. You want that. But as a teenager or a young adult, you feel the shame that your parents are going to be disappointed, right? That's what she said. She doesn't want to disappoint her parents. So it's hard. I could see both ends. Anyway, my sister was pleased with herself. I felt horribly betrayed, probably about the way my mother felt, to be honest with you. My mother felt betrayed by me. I felt betrayed by my sister. But my longest wait was waiting for my father to return home. I lay in bed with the covers across me. I heard his car drive up, and then I heard him come in the front door and say hello to my mother. Very cheerful. My mother said, we have to talk. My father had a routine of getting orange juice and vanilla ice cream when he came home, and that's what he did. That's a weird combination, but okay. Then he sat down in his chair, and it had those leather straps underneath that made a certain sound. And I knew as soon as he was in that chair, the discussion was going to take place. My father said, It can't be that bad. What's the matter? And my mother said, Pam's pregnant. There was absolute silence. Just absolute silence. My dad got up. I don't know where he went. I was expecting him to come up to my room, but he didn't. The next morning, I could tell my mother had cried all night. Had cried all night. Her eyes were very red and tired and gaunt looking. My father had the kind of look on his face. I mean, it would have been easier to have someone just take a gun and shoot me. Please don't do that. This afternoon comes and we hold a big discussion. They are discussing what we are going to do, me not being part of the we. Always, right? I was to see the doctor, and then we would have another meeting. I thought, well, they don't know I have a job lined up and all this money saved. They don't know that I bought a television and baby clothes and that my boyfriend and I love each other and that we're going to get married. So I wrote out a plan and felt very prepared for the next discussion. But nobody ever asked for my opinion. I never got to open my mouth. The decision, was made. It was so surreal to have people talking about you like you're not even in the room. Like your life doesn't matter. Like the baby was a mistake. He didn't feel like a mistake to me. He never felt like a mistake. I continued going to school for a period of time until it became more difficult to hide it. The faculty decided that I was becoming disruptive to the school process and a bad example. It was determined that I would leave the school. I was not welcome there, was what I was told. My parents decided that the best thing for me was to send me away to a Florence Crenton home. They packed my suitcase, and late one night, they took me away. I've never been away from home, never spent a night over at anybody's house, never gone to camp, never anything. They walked me up to the steps to this place that was not in a very good neighborhood. My dad handed me my suitcase, and they turned around and left. I'm sure my parents thought they were doing the right thing because there was this booklet that talked about the wonderful meals and the education and the beautiful day room with its bright colors. I know what my parents thought they were bringing me to, but that's not where my parents left me. Okay, pausing. So we go from she might have German measles to we're completely forgetting that. Now, granted, the measles for the most part has been eradicated because of vaccines, right? Y'all can look it up. That being said, during this time, my dad actually had the measles, the German measles and the regular measles all at once, and it was painful. Quite an interesting story. He was coming back from Germany at the time. After World War II, he lived in Germany with his dad. He was 4 or 5, and he was on the Queen Mary coming home, and he was running around the ship with 2 sets of measles. Yeah, great, isn't it? Fabulous. Anyway, let's continue on, because I just went on a rant. I didn't understand it at the time, but in the military, they do a thing where they train you to comply with the rules by tearing you down and breaking your spirit so you will conform. And then little by little, they build you into what they want you to be. That is completely correct. That is exactly what the military does. And that's what they did there. I was going to try and get through this and get out. That was my goal. I wasn't going to let anybody there know me. The next day, I had to have my physical, kind of like an entry physical, I guess. I go to the infirmary. There was a nurse and a doctor, and I'm told to take my clothes off. Nobody hands me a gown. Nothing. I mean, my father didn't even see me without my clothes on, and they wanted me to undress in front of this strange man. It was the first time I ever had a speculum used on me, and it hurt. Okay, if you don't know what a speculum is, it's one of those metal things that go up your hoo-ha, and they spread it so they can see inside, and it typically hurts a lot. Now, it depends on the doctor if it'll hurt, because I will tell you that with all my exams except for one, and it was a new OBGYN, it hurt like hell. Okay. And that's before and after having a baby. So, yeah, they hurt. I kept trying to move back, and the nurse was holding me down by the shoulders, telling me to relax. I wasn't relaxing. How can you? Like, those things hurt. Like, Anyway, finally the doctor said, listen, you got yourself into this. If you would have kept your legs together, we wouldn't be doing this now. I love how they always say these things, right? Not doctors, but like people in general. Just keep your legs together, then you wouldn't have gotten pregnant. Do they know how sex works? Like, do they understand that there's two people involved, right? Lovely. Always blaming the women. I remember our eyes locked and he was smiling. I don't think he liked women. I really don't, but I'm sure he looked good in his community because he was volunteering his time with all these bad girls. And it's funny, while I was locked up, I would call the father and he was going on with his life. He was having his summer and was, worried about whether he would get a new tape or album. People had gossiped about him, but they were still allowed to hang out with him. Before I left home, nobody was allowed to be around me. Occasionally the house got to go out as a gaggle of pregnant females. The neighborhood we were in, like I said, was not a good neighborhood. When we would take the van to go places, the neighborhood kids would throw things at us. Rotten fruit, eggs, and the eggs hurt. When you get hit in the face with an egg, that hurts, and sometimes it would actually break the skin. They would never let us back in the house to change. I remember one time they took us to the beach to walk the boardwalk, and we had gotten pelted pretty good. So here we are, a gaggle of pregnant girls marked with this stuff, and it smelled. I was thinking to myself, they tell us not to make a spectacle of ourselves, to maintain our dignity, but they go out of their way to make sure we're humiliated. Yeah, that's kind of gross, and that's assault. They really, really allow certain things to get away, they let other people get away with a lot, and it's really disgusting. We had to write thank you notes to whoever dared to drive the van. One time, we couldn't even get out the front door. There was so much being thrown, so everybody retreated, including the person who was going to drive the van. I remember the driver crying. It had never happened to him before. The lady who was with him just kept saying, oh, this is normal, this is normal. And he kept saying, these poor girls, these poor girls. She said, well, they just have to accept it. She wasn't trying to be hateful. She really wasn't. She was just being matter of fact. A lot of treatment there was matter of fact. The driver never came back, by the way. Yeah, that's, even the driver had sympathy, empathy for these girls. Nobody deserves this. Anyway, we had different volunteers all the time. I called them do-gooders. There were those who wanted to elevate themselves in the community and those who cared. I avoided all of them, especially the ones who cared. Looking back, I was becoming extremely hard. You couldn't afford to have somebody care about you because you weren't really allowed to care about yourself. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I just wanted to survive. Sorry, I keep stopping. So when it comes to do-gooders, a lot of adoptive parents do this. They have this savior mentality. And it's really kind of gross. I'm not saying that these people didn't actually care, right? She said there were two different people. There were people that actually cared, which, great. And there were people that just wanted to elevate themselves. Many of the times, not saying all, but many, adoptive parents are those that want to elevate themselves. Oh, but I'm taking in a baby that's not of my own, or they're orphaned, or they were in foster care. Is this saviorism, right? We call it the white saviorism. Typically, they are white, okay? That's not to say that there aren't other ethnic races that don't do this too, but the term is white saviorism. And they don't actually care. They just use the person or the do-gooding, the volunteer part of it to make themselves look better. And they usually boast about it when they're with their friends, like, oh yeah, I volunteered at, an orphanage, or I went and, worked at, the animal shelter or stuff like that, right? Whereas there's people like myself who actually care and if I go to the animal shelter, sometimes I'll take a picture or two and be like, hey, these 2 babies are up for adoption. Go check them out. They're super sweet. Here's our experience, right? Or like I just take pictures because it's really sweet the way my son interacts with animals. But I'm not boasting like, oh, I'm going to the animal shelter every month or whatever. Like, I don't post half of what I do because it's not necessary. You know what I'm saying? But I do share, like, if there's shelter people, if there's, what do you call it? Not volunteers, employees of the shelter who I am friends with, who post about certain babies. Like, there's one dog that they're trying to get adopted. And so they're trying to post her picture and like how well she is. So I share it, on Facebook. Fortunately, I'm on Facebook. And, I tell of our experience, like, hey, I wish I could adopt this pup. But I can't because the dog's not good with cats, and I have cats. But this dog is super friendly, great with kids, go check this baby out. Something so super simple, right? Or the other day, there's this cat, Mamacita, who they put this cat at one of our local stores and from the shelter to hopefully get her adopted. And, I boosted the picture by commenting on it, like, she's a really sweet cat. She's the mama of our 2 newborns. We have 2 10-week-old kittens currently. So she's the mama. She's, great, loving. Like, she needs a home, and I wish I could take her in. I really do. I wish I took all of them in. I couldn't, but it's just little things like that. Like, you can tell that there's a difference. I'm making this up about me, but the point is, you can tell there's a difference between people that legitimately care versus people that are just doing it for social status, right? And it's the way that they talk about it. Sorry, I just went way, way overboard. Continuing on. I have to say they fed us very well. They took excellent care of us from this food standpoint. The lady who worked in the kitchen was an African American woman. She used to call us marshmallows on toothpicks. Her jokes were always about being black. She didn't like the term black, so she used the N word, but I'm not going to say it. I don't find that I feel uncomfortable saying it. Anyway, she didn't like to use the term black, right? It wasn't what they used back then. I blushed very easily. I'm very fair, and when she would say that, my ears and my face would light up. She just loved getting that kind of reaction from me. I learned to like to cook as a result of watching her. When she cooked, she was taking care of us. She was loving us all. It didn't matter if you were a 25-year-old woman having a baby or you were a girl as young as 14. She congratulated each and every one of us after we had our babies. Nobody else did that. She'd tell us what a good job we did. I've always thought of hearth and home as being such a positive thing. That comes from her. I don't know if I ever told her. Hopefully she knows. But that was the best part of my day, being in the kitchen with her. Okay, pausing. I know, again, I'm sorry. But as we've talked about previously in this book, that most often Black young women were not going into these homes, right? Because of the social economic, and they had a little bit more support with the family and so forth. So they always say have a Black auntie, right? It's kind of what this woman was doing. She was being that Black auntie. She was loving. She was teaching them. Yeah, she could joke around about, color of skin in a fun way, right? But she was doing it in a loving way, and she really cared about the girls. Now, that is the difference that we're talking about. Black aunties are the best. I gotta tell you, they really are. And they make some bomb-ass food. Like, they really do. They put love and soul. That's why they call it soul food. Love and soul into that food. Okay, anyway. When they wheeled me into the delivery room, my mom and dad were standing in the hallway. My dad was giving me a kind of pep talk, and my mom had a smile on her face. But she just looked like she wanted to cry. She's looking at this little girl holding a stuffed animal on her way to deliver a baby. I can't even begin to imagine. My baby was born, and he was perfect. He was beautiful. My doctor gave me a blue badge that said it's a boy. So I had my stuffed dog and this badge. I asked my parents, "Have you seen him? Have you seen him?" My father wouldn't answer, but my mom went to see him, and she told me that he was tiny and had very long sideburns. It was funny because this was in Los Angeles, and a famous movie star's wife delivered that same day. Her room was directly across from mine, and there were flowers. I've never seen so many flowers in my life. All these people were going in and out, and they were photographers. And it was like watching a fairy tale. I'm across the hall, and there is nothing. My room is very sterile, very green, no flowers, no pictures, no congratulations. I watched what was happening, and my mom said, "Well, when you get married and have a baby, you'll have your turn too." Everybody was talking about this brand new life, and I thought, my son's a brand new life. They made the mistake. They made the mistake of bringing my baby to me. I wasn't supposed to see him. When the nurse came in, I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm bringing your baby so you can feed him." I struggled with that, with the right thing to do was, and I thought, I'm not going to tell her. I thought it would be the only time that I would ever get to see him. I unwrapped him and counted his toes. I looked at his belly. When he would breathe, his whole tummy would move. His little face was so tiny, and he had the tiniest little fingernails, but his feet were just like his dad's. I said, "You've got Fred Flintstone's feet, just like your daddy." I got to see him every day, 3 or 4 times a day. When I was able to start walking, I would go and sit outside the nursery. All the fathers were going, "That's my boy, that's my boy," and they had my baby and another one off in a corner, like they were diseased or something. There was no name tag, nothing at the foot of like the other ones. I felt so horrible, like I had done this to him. I had caused him to be ostracized. That's when it sank in that I didn't deserve him. I couldn't do this to him for the rest of his life. He didn't do anything wrong. I did. They're ostracizing her and in the process the child, and it's disgusting. And the ostracization continues to happen even as an adoptee. And it's gross. It really is. Anyway, it came time to sign the papers. I hadn't seen him for weeks and weeks, and they brought him in. He was so little. He had a preemie outfit on with a short-sleeved shirt, and his fingers barely stuck out past the edge of the sleeves. I was ecstatic seeing him, but my heart was breaking because I knew it was going to be the very last time. I kept thinking, if he's in trouble, how am I going to know? How will I help him? It's very hard to explain. Part of me had enough indoctrination to believe I was not a mother. They make that very clear. You are not a mother. You are too young. You are a bad person. You got pregnant and you aren't married. You're not entitled to this baby. You're going to give this baby a chance in life. Part of me accepted that wisdom. And then there was the other part of me that had feelings that I wasn't supposed to have. All right, so pausing again for a moment. When I was pregnant, so 2 things. One, when I was giving birth, there was also a 14-year-old giving birth. And my OB said that, because of their bodies are not, they haven't hit a certain age with puberty, that it can be extremely complicated. So in that terms, it's hard, right? And I'm just talking pregnancy point. On the other aspect, when I found out I was pregnant, the first thing my OB asked was, knowing I was going to be a single parent, was, "Do you want to put him up for adoption?" And I was like, no. she also asked, if you want an abortion, there's only so many weeks that you have to decide. I knew at that point that wasn't going to happen. That was my choice. And I do appreciate her giving me that option. But to assume that those are the only two options besides, obviously raising my child. Again, this was back in 2012 that I found out. So 2013 he was born. Is quite sad. And I wish there was definitely more support. But at least they actually gave me an option. Now, that being said, I knew that I was never going to put my kid up for adoption, ever, because I was adopted. So, anyway. So they walked off with the papers and the baby. I walked off believing that my son was going to go to the kind of environment I had asked for, and that he would have the history. They'd asked me to write out in longhand what my requests were, and I gave it a lot of thought. My son was a mixed heritage baby. He was half Swedish and half Mexican. I wanted him, if possible, to have a combination family, if not a Hispanic family. I could still remember the lady sitting at the desk nodding her head as if she was listening and understood what I wanted and talked to me seriously. I wrote down my information and the father's information, my social security number, where I lived, my parents' names, and I was secure in the knowledge that if he needed anything, if he needed a kidney or blood or anything, I'd be there for him. I put it all in the envelope and sealed it. Oh, okay, so I don't know if this is quite often how they do things with adoption. I will say that in my adoption folder, I did get this from my birth mom, similar, where they did a survey of her and they did a survey of my father, although my father's answers were very shorthanded, but there was definitely more answers in there, because the birth mom, the moms, as a mom, you want your baby to have everything best possible. So Pam was already thinking ahead, like, this baby needs to have his heritage. He needs to have access to me just in case. Like, she was really caring, right? And I'm betting, before we read on, that they didn't give this information to, I'm going to say, guessing. They likely didn't give that information to the adoptive parents, let alone if the adoptive parents gave it to the child. And that's incredibly important information. Anyway, the agreement was that they're going to give that piece of paper to my child. It would become part of his file, and on his 18th birthday, 18, right? They need more. They need it sooner. It would be made available to him. When people make the promises to you, and you don't have any way of verifying it, it gives people a lot of latitude to do or not do what they've promised. She promised me, and that was my promise to my child. You get to know your history. You're not someone that I'm ashamed of. You're not bad. You did nothing wrong. I told him I loved him with all my heart. I did the best I could. I wished I could be with him, and I would think about him every day that I drew my breath. I came home, and no one ever said a word. Not, are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? Do you miss your son? Are you heartbroken? Do you worry? Do you wonder if he's alive? They never asked, probably because they were afraid of the answer. When I would think about him, I felt like I was violating the trust, the deal. He wasn't mine anymore. I didn't have that right. So she absolutely is not violating for thinking about her child that is still her son. Despite what people like to say about birth moms, that's still their child. They will always be their child genetically and biologically. And even though they might not have legal rights, that's still mom. That's still dad. Now, how the adoptee wants to refer to their biological parents as, some go with fake or real or natural versus, biological, whatever they want to call them. That's different, right? That's individual. But they're still technically still biological parents. So anyway, I went back to school, but I never fit in again with the kids. I was never a teenager, never went to prom, never went to a dance, never went to a football game, never had counseling, never got out of line. I worked about 60 hours a week. I went to school full time. I was an adult. I married at 18 and I had a son. I did it the right way, but I was petrified when it came time to go home from the hospital. I was afraid they were going to take him from me. My husband knew I had given a child up, but he still couldn't understand what was the matter with me. I didn't want anybody to see me walking out of the hospital with this baby. We got into the car and my mom said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I'm afraid that someone's going to come take the baby." I was just waiting for the police to come. Giving up my first son had left such an imprint. It was trapped in my brain. I was not allowed to be a mother. Society expects you to continue on with your life, to be a productive human being. Don't think about it. Don't dwell on it. Don't feel sorry for yourself. You did it to yourself. But you are conscious every single day that there is a little person out there. They're trapped as a little person in your head because the last picture you have of them is of a helpless baby. I can't tell you how many times my next son would have a first tooth, the first time he rode a bicycle, the first anything, and my mind would go to my other son. What were his first like? Is he happy? Did I do the right thing? I might have done the right thing. Everybody said I was doing the right thing. I've spent 34 years thinking if I had a choice, I would have done it differently. I wanted college for him. I wanted him to have a mother and a father. I wanted him to have all the things that normal kids have. And it was very clear to me that society and the people around me would make that impossible. As an adult, you find out you did have a choice. You could have kept that baby. So, again, we're talking coercion and manipulation. She didn't really have a choice, right? That's why it's coerced birth. It's forced, birth. It's forced, not the birth part, the adoption part. They don't give you all the information. They don't give you the resources to help you. They, like she said, they break you down to make you think this way, and they will do everything to take that baby away. And it sucks. Sorry, where was I? Would I have done it differently? I don't know. I wish I could have done it differently. That's what my heart says. I would have given anything, to have been able to do it differently. My sons from my marriage are the absolute apple of my eye. My whole world, everything. I became a school nurse so I could be at their school when they were there, and off when they were off. I mean, it was a little bit neurotic, to be honest with you. The boys grew up knowing my first son's father. He was a part of their lives for about 12 years. So they always knew about their older brother. I would say I don't have the right to look for this baby, but he has his information, so don't be surprised if someday he shows up on the front porch. He's welcome in my home and my heart, as you guys are. We are family. All right, pausing there. The way that this bio mom talks about her first son with her other children, her other boys, is extremely important. That is something that I wish I had with my half siblings, at least my half sister and my half brother. My half sister, I don't know where she grew up. She's on my biological father's side. I don't even know if she knows about me, right? I don't think my older half brother knows about me. That's complex. I have mixed feelings about it. I think he might, but might not. Anyway, my half younger brother that's on my mom's side will never know. She refuses to tell him because she doesn't think he could handle it. Because he's neurodivergent. He's autistic, and she doesn't think that he'll understand. And I don't know what the right thing is in that circumstance, but I feel like it's wrong. It feels wrong for me. Maybe it's me being, I don't know, jealous. I definitely have some jealous tendencies when she talks about him and posts about him. And it feels like I'm still this hidden secret, even though we have an open reunion. It just feels like I feel forgotten. And then with my bio dad side, there's nothing on there. There's literally nothing. It's been over a year since I've reached out and I haven't heard back. So, it kind of is what it is. So anyway, I just want to say I give props to this birth mom with telling her other children, because that doesn't always happen. Anyway, I'm sure there are women who suppress the experience, but I don't think it ever goes away. There's not a day since I was 15 years old that I haven't thought about him. I will live this for the rest of my life. Criminals sometimes get a life sentence, and that's what I feel like I got. I think that's what people don't understand. The expectation is that you will get over it. I will never have peace. I will never have peace. And that's how many of us adoptees feel. We won't be able to have those connections. We won't be able to have those reunions because of certain situations, whether it's closed documentations, which most states are, or because, our biological parents haven't done their therapy and they're in the fog. Less so with the birth moms, not as much with the birth fathers. Or, there's death. Unfortunately, that happens when a lot of people go searching and find out this information. People have died and you can't get answers. So it just sucks all around. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great night, and I will see you guys Wednesday for chapter 7.